Welcome. Listing Notice 3 lists activities that require an environmental authorization prior to their commencement within specific identified geographical areas. Unfortunately, many of these identified geographical areas are not generally known, so the goal of this series is to improve our understanding of these important areas. In this video, we explain what CBAs, ESAs and PAs are and where to find them. Welcome. My name is Sean McGregor of Ecological Environmental Consultants based in Mpumalanga, South Africa, and we're on a mission to empower all South Africans to protect their environment through the correct interpretation and application of our environmental legislation. So if you want to learn how our environmental law applies to you and avoid unnecessary and costly mistakes, if you want to increase your knowledge and skills, if you're in need of mentorship or you want to earn CPD points, then you'll want to subscribe to this channel. You can subscribe by swiping over the icon to the bottom right hand side of your screen. Don't forget to click on the bell notification icon so that you can be notified the moment we upload a new video. And if you do know of anyone else who can benefit from these videos, please help spread the message by liking them. Thank you. We continue with the same series, Identified Geographical Areas, and the title of this video is CBAs, ESAs and PAs. But before I dive into these three identified geographical areas, I first want to explain what biodiversity priority areas are. As the name implies, biodiversity priority areas are important for conserving a representative sample of ecosystems and species, for maintaining ecological processes, or for the provision of ecosystem services. They are identified in spatial biodiversity plans comprising maps and the accompanying data. Now, there are 11 different categories of biodiversity priority areas, and I have already described 3 of these in our previous video. If you recall, they included critically endangered ecosystems. The abbreviation is CR, and these are ecosystem types that have very little remaining of their original extent in a natural or near natural condition. Then there was endangered ecosystems, or EN. These are ecosystem types that are becoming close to critically endangered. And finally, we discussed focus areas for land-based protection, for land-based protected area expansion. These are large, intact, unfragmented areas of land with a high biodiversity importance suitable for either the creation or expansion of a large protected area. Now, the 3 identified geographical areas that we are going to explain in this video are also biodiversity priority areas. Let's start with PAs, or protected areas. Please forgive me if I keep on looking down at the ground because the grass is so tall and I'm so nervous of standing on a puffy at this time of year. Okay, right, so protected areas are areas of land or sea that are formally protected by law. That is, once they have been legally declared as a protected area. And they are managed mainly for biodiversity conservation. In terms of Listing Notice 3, a protected area means those protected areas contemplated in Section 9 of the National Environmental Management Protected Areas Act and the core area of a biosphere reserve, and shall include their buffers. Now, I want to stress that last part of the definition. Protected areas, irrespective of whether they're contemplated in Section 9 of NEMPA or whether they are core areas of a biosphere reserve, include their buffers. So what is a buffer? Well, again, in terms of Listing Notice 3, a buffer includes an area that extends 10 kilometers from the proclaimed boundary of a World Heritage Site or a national park, and 5 kilometers from the proclaimed boundary of a nature reserve, or is that area defined as such for a biosphere reserve. Now let's return to Section 9 of NEMPA to get some more clarity on the different kinds of protected areas. The system of protected areas in South Africa includes different kinds of protected areas, and although they're all to some extent managed under the Umbrella Act of NEMPA, some of these protected areas are managed under separate acts as well, and I'll identify them now. So let's start with those protected areas that are declared as such in terms of NEMPA, the National Environmental Management Protected Areas Act. They would include special nature reserves, national parks, nature reserves, protected environments, and marine protected areas. Now, the first four categories that I mentioned, the national parks, special nature reserves, and protected environments, have in the past been referred to as specific management categories of protected areas. You'll also come across the terms national protected area and provincial protected area. Basically, a national protected area would include the national parks, special nature reserves, marine protected areas, and it can include nature reserves or protected environments that are managed by a national organ of state. Provincial protected areas refer to nature reserves and protected environments that are managed by a provincial organ of state. Okay. The other protected areas that you get would include mountain catchment areas that are declared as such in terms of the Mountain Catchment Act of 1970. Then World Heritage Sites, which are declared in terms of the World Heritage Convention Act of 1999. And finally, sorry, I can't remember it, specially protected forest areas, or forest nature reserves, and forest wilderness areas declared in terms of the National Forests Act of 1998. It is the Minister's responsibility to maintain a register of protected areas, including a list of all the kinds of protected areas I've just described now. And you can find it. It is on the department's homepage of their website, www.environment.gov.za. Then there are CBAs, or Critical Biodiversity Areas. CBAs are aquatic or terrestrial areas required to meet biodiversity targets for ecosystems, species, or ecological processes as identified in a systematic biodiversity plan. In terms of Listing Notice 3, a systematic biodiversity plan is a plan that identifies important areas for biodiversity conservation by taking into account biodiversity pattern, that would be the principle of representation, as well as the ecological and evolutionary processes required to sustain those patterns, the principle of persistence. These plans must set quantitative targets or thresholds for terrestrial and aquatic biodiversity features in order to conserve a representative sample of biodiversity pattern and ecological processes. So basically, a CBA, or Critical Biodiversity Area, is an important area for biodiversity conservation specifically required to meet terrestrial or aquatic biodiversity targets, and in so doing conserve a representative sample of biodiversity pattern and ecological processes. This understanding of a CBA is further reinforced by Listing Notice 3's definition for aquatic critical biodiversity areas, which means linkages between catchment important rivers and sensitive estuaries, whose safeguarding is critically required in order to meet biodiversity pattern and process thresholds, and are spatially defined as part of a bioregional plan or systematic biodiversity plan. Let's use a practical example. Listed Activity 6 of Listing Notice 3 reads, the development of resorts, lodges, hotels, tourism, or hospitality facilities that sleeps 15 people or more. Now, if you're in the Orange Free State, then you would trigger this activity if you are in, among other areas, critical biodiversity areas as identified in systematic biodiversity plans adopted by the competent authority or in bioregional plans. So CBAs are found not only in systematic biodiversity plans but also bioregional plans. And just out of interest, the bioregional plan is contemplated in Chapter 3 of the National Environmental Management Biodiversity Act 2004. These plans contain effective measures or measures for effectively managing biodiversity in bioregions, and they need to be published by either the Minister or MEC by notice in a gazette. You'll find these bioregional plans and systematic biodiversity plans in or on SANBI's Biodiversity GIS website. That would be BGIS. And just remember that in this particular example, Listed Activity 6 of Listing Notice 3, you would need to confirm whether the systematic biodiversity plan has been adopted by the competent authority. And finally, there are ESAs, or Ecological Support Areas. These are aquatic and terrestrial areas that are not essential for meeting biodiversity targets, but they do play a very important role in supporting the ecological functioning of CBAs or in delivering ecosystem services. Let's return to our example we used earlier, listed activity 6 of listing notice 3, relating to the development of resorts, lodges, hotels, tourism or hospitality facilities that sleeps 15 people or more. If you are in Gauteng, you will trigger this activity if you are in, among other areas, sites identified as Critical Biodiversity Areas or Ecological Support Areas in the Gauteng Conservation Plan or in bioregional plans. So I'm going to assume that the Gauteng Conservation Plan is a systematic biodiversity plan that has been adopted by the Gauteng Department of Environmental Affairs. Similarly, ecological support areas can be found in either bioregional plans or in systematic biodiversity plans. And as I mentioned earlier, both of these are available on SANBI's Biodiversity GIS website, BGIS. And that's it. Guys, I really hope this has been helpful, and thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. If you have joined our membership program, you will receive an additional video. We return to the computer to show you exactly how to or where to find these CBAs, ESAs and PAs. If you haven't joined our membership program yet, then check it out on Patreon. Otherwise, if you're looking for a consultant to help you with a one-off project, you're welcome to visit our website. Hey, check out our previous video in the series. We looked at urban areas, threatened ecosystems and focus areas. The next video, we look at EMFs, SDFs. What are those things? You need to know them, guys. So subscribe, click on the bell notification icon. If you did like the video and you know of anyone else who can benefit, like it. Thank you, keep strong, and God bless.